In this video, we're going to discuss going from a small number of stitches worked in I-cord to a larger number of stitches and transitioning to working in the round. I'm going to be demonstrating on DPNs, but the process will be same no matter how you do this. The first thing to do is to increase. I tend to say continue working as I-cord, knit front and back all. So that just means push it to the tip and increase. So we'll knit front and back, knit front and back, knit front and back, and we have gone from 3 stitches to 6 stitches, and 6 stitches is right at the limit where I am happy working I-cord. After that it starts to gap quite considerably around the back. So we will continue to work 6-stitch I-cord for a few rounds, working 6 stitches in the round on double points or magic loop or whatever. It's a really frustrating process to have so few stitches, and so continuing to work these first rounds of the hat as I-cord is just like a real relief for feeling like you're wrestling with a porcupine the way that knitting in the round on very few stitches can. So that's 2 rounds of 6-stitch I-cord, and you can see I'm kind of tugging on that. That helps the I-cord kind of pull down and just look right. You can wait till after you're done. It's just something that I do almost reflexively without thought. All right, so the next thing that my pattern will say is distribute for working in the round, and then we're going to also simultaneously work an increase round. Now, if you are working on DPNs, that would involve getting 2 stitches on each of 3 needles, which is going to look a lot like super floppy, because when you have only 2 stitches, the balance point of the DPN is very small. You've got a little bit here and it's very wobbly. Whereas if you had lots of stitches, that helps hold it and keep it from being very wobbly. And a similar thing also happens with the other methods of knitting in the round. It's just highly increased with the DPNs. So if we can make this a little easier, that's a great thing to do. So you're going to need to be working in sections. With DPNs, that's simple. You simply put each section on a DPN. What I like to do, so you have 2 options. You can simply distribute the stitches onto working in the round. I will demonstrate magic loop in a moment. There'll be a timestamp down below where I show this. All right, so here we have our stitches distributed for working in the round. I have 3 sections, so I have 3 working needles. And then I guess I have 3 needles and then I'll have another working needle. What I've got is I'm holding the I-cord to kind of give me something so that I'm not holding one needle and the other ones are flopping. It seems to stabilize the whole thing. The working yarn will always be coming off the last stitch we knit, so that can't be the first needle we knit. So we need to rotate this and bring it so that the stitch closest in the circle to this working yarn is in front of us. So now we're ready to work in the round. A key thing when you are redistributing the stitches to work in the round is to make sure that the needle is angled nicely. I like to have it over on the right side and under on the left side. That seems to keep the whole wrestling a porcupine feeling to a like it's not a greased porcupine, at least. So I'll pick it up. I will hold the needle I'm working on, and I will work knit front and back, knit 1. And so that is 1 section of the instructions, and I will do that all 3 sections. Knit front and back, knit 1, and then I will have 9 stitches on the needles. A second alternative is to actually work the increase round and the redistribution simultaneously. So that would look like this. We'd start as though we were working I-cord. So we'd have brought the stitches over here to the front of this left needle tip. I'm going to knit the first one front and back to do the increase. Then I'm going to knit 1, just as it tells me to do per section. All right, so I've knit front and back, knit 1 onto that needle, and now I'm going to let it dangle. So it is important here that you do not have very slippery needles. I have very slippery needles, and I am being incredibly careful here. I do not usually recommend metal needles for DPNs for gnomes. I think that wood or carbons or bamboo or something grippy is much kinder. So then I would do the same thing. I would knit front and back onto a new needle. Knit 1. All right, that's the second of the 3 sections taken care of. I will often rest this on the table as I work, but that will create a lot of scratching sounds for you, so I'm going to not do that, but I do recommend that if you're finding this a bit much, if you rest these tips on the needle or on the table or on your lap, it goes a lot better. So then last thing to do is knit front and back. Knit 1. And now you are ready to knit in the round. And the key thing with knitting in the round when you're trying to figure out where do I go, what do I do, is to remember that the yarn will always come from the last stitch worked. And it will tell you the nearest stitch to that should be your next stitch you work. So that would mean this needle comes next in the circle and this stitch comes next. And so now I can just proceed and work in the round. So we have worked our 3-stitch I-cord, we've increased to 6, we've worked a few extra rounds of I-cord, and now it's time to redistribute. Whether you're using magic loop, 2 circulars, or flexi flips, the distribution process is going to be pretty much the same. If we have an even number of sections, you would be dividing the stitches 50-50, or however your pattern would tell you. But in this gnome, we have 3 sections, and so we're going to need to distribute them unevenly. And I like to do 2/3 of the stitches on one needle and then 1/3 of the stitches on the other. So that would look like this. You'll need a stitch marker. So the way I like to do it is to slide the stitches onto the cord for I-cord, or it's a little different obviously for 2 circulars. So we have 2 stitches per section, so 2 stitches will go to the back, 4 stitches will go to the front. I will redistribute these, and then we have a removable stitch marker, which makes placing the stitch marker between the stitches on the needles nice and easy. So I will mark them as 2 and 2 on this front needle. And now I know always that the beginning of the round is on the needle that has more stitches. That's how I sort of calculate that. If you would like to place another stitch marker for the beginning of the round, obviously that is an easy thing to do. Again, I would use a removable stitch marker and just yank it on or secure it onto one of these stitches. We have our sections distributed. The yarn is coming off the back, so we will redistribute, or not redistribute, we will prepare for working in the round. Again, this is for magic loop, knit front and back. Knit 1 is what we do after we redistribute for the round for the more typical gnomes I do. That's per section, so that's 1 section done. Knit front and back, knit 1, and those are my tips for the transition between I-cord and knitting in the round. I hope those helps. If you have questions, ask them below. I look forward to seeing the gnomes you make from these. Happy gnoming.